Welcome to the Through Faith and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Gauthier, here to answer your questions about Christianity, share evangelism tips, and talk about how Jesus changes everything. This is your invitation to stay. All of the links and resources are in the description. You can also go to gauthier.com. That should have everything that you're looking for. There's another way to do life, and it's by following Jesus. I hope you enjoy today's episode. I've made a few episodes on the origin of the universe. The big question is what happened at the beginning? And it's this never-ending debate because no one was there in the beginning. Some will say that there was this big bang. Others will say that the universe has always existed. Some will claim that this is the only time an effect didn't have some sort of cause. Others will say that every effect has a cause, and because the universe is an effect, this cause must be some sort of creator. Theists use the cosmological, teleological, and moral law arguments to point to the author of the universe. Christians, including me, will say that this author is the Judeo-Christian God, because everything that we know about this creator perfectly matches Jesus. Now, admittedly, these arguments for the existence of God are backed up pretty well. But surely it must be because we just don't have all of the science to understand how the universe came about, right? Like, that's what we're missing. We just don't have all of the science yet. One day, science will explain everything, and we'll see that there's no reason for God. Christianity will die. This is the God of the gaps argument. The quote, gaps in scientific knowledge are explained by the work of God for now, but one day we will see the role of God diminish as scientific research progresses. You're not alone if that's how you think of God's role. I would guess a handful of atheists think this as well. I've wondered that myself. Is it really God, or do we just not know the answer yet? If the line of thinking is, I don't understand it, therefore God did it, then I can completely understand why atheists have a problem with God. I also have a problem with that line of thinking. Today, we are going to dive into the God of the gaps argument. There seems to be two major assumptions. One is that explanations that feature God or God's actions stem from ignorance. And two is that everything can or will be explained by science. Let's look at the first one first. Do theistic explanations commit the appeal to ignorance fallacy? The appeal to ignorance fallacy is this. If an argument claims that some statement is false just because it is not known to be true or has not been proved, or it claims that a statement is true just because it is not known to be false, or because it has not been refuted or disproved, then the argument commits the fallacy of appeal to ignorance. So in layman's terms, if you conclude something is true simply because there is no evidence against it, you're committing this fallacy. And from the research I've done, I'd say no theist actually argues in this way. Well, I mean, there's probably like one individual, right? Like, you always have to have like one person that that does this. So I would say most do not argue in this way. Theists do not, they don't opt for the existence of a creator because they see this gap in science. The research published by pro-intelligent design scientists and philosophers is based on positive evidence for design, not the absence of evidence for materialistic alternatives. If God of the Gaps was an appeal to ignorance, it would be something like this. Cause A is insufficient to produce effect C. Therefore, cause B must have produced effect C. Or maybe we can get a little bit more specific with this. It would be like saying this: natural processes are insufficient to produce the information in DNA. Therefore, God must have produced the information in DNA. If this is how theists argue, then yes, this is absolutely a God of the Gaps and appeal to ignorance type of argument. But that's not how they form their conclusions. Their argument is more like this: natural processes are insufficient to produce the information in DNA. Intelligent design is sufficient to produce the information in DNA. Therefore, intelligent design is the best explanation of the information in DNA. Do you see the difference? This, on the other hand, is a valid argument because theists are using inference for the best explanation, not ignorance. So maybe you stumbled upon this episode because you thought theists were arguing out of ignorance, but that's not correct. We see here that they don't. They form their conclusions based on the positive evidence for design, not the absence of information. They claim that there is a God because of the evidence that directly supports it. Feel free to check out my other episodes. But before you do, let's take a look at that second assumption. Everything will one day be explained by science. If you've listened to the Science Disproves Miracles episode, then you likely already know where I'm going with this. Science is great. I spend a lot of my time reading science. We know so much from science, but the natural sciences cannot provide an explanation for everything. And that's just by definition. Science is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. However, there are some things we can't observe or experiment with. For example, and ironically, the origins of the universe. Our universe began once. This is why when we look to answer the question, what happened in the beginning, we must not limit ourselves to science. We're not going to find the answer by science alone. And so we take all of these different fields of study, like mathematics, philosophy, cosmology, theology, and we kind of just put them to the test. And we investigate what is the most reasonable explanation for reality. In the beginning, what happened? What makes the most sense? What is the most probable? What is plausible? Science, by definition, also fails to answer these types of questions. What is the difference between good and evil? Am I a valuable person? What is love? Science is an amazing tool that helps us discover knowledge, but it can only tell us about some things in the material world. Materialism asserts that everything is or can be explained in relation to matter. We have no scientific evidence for miracles. We have no scientific evidence for God. You're right, because by definition, we can never prove these things through science. But do not be so quick to rule out the existence of God. Let me explain. The definition of a miracle is this: a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. It's when things happen that cannot be explained through natural laws. So to my friend who only believes in science, yes, according to your worldview, miracles cannot exist. But may I lovingly challenge you with 2 miracle claims that we can't ignore. Number 1, it's a miracle for the universe to come from nothing. We know this from the law of conservation. And number 2, it's a miracle that the information in DNA arises without intelligence. Like, information never just comes about on its own. So where did it come from? In one moment, space, time, and matter were all born into existence. We know DNA contains information. Specifically, the message contained in the nucleus has the information of 10 encyclopedias. And the information equivalent of 1,000 encyclopedias is in the entire cell. Science is fantastic, but to think that everything will one day be explained by science is flawed, friend. This is why when we study the origin of the universe, we must look at multiple fields. We must look at all of the theories out there to find what is the most reasonable explanation for how we got here. Theists do not arrive at the existence of God because there is this gap in knowledge. Since science cannot explain everything, we look for other explanations. We look to other explanations. You're right to say that science cannot prove God, but you're also left with 2, quote, miracles that are impossible to explain through science alone. Do not be so quick to rule out miracles. Do not be so quick to rule out God. The big question is what happened at the beginning. Could I share with you my worldview? It's quite poetic that the Bible opens in this way. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is the very first line of the Bible. What happened at the beginning? God created. From the research I've done, I've found that our universe begs for a creator. Nothing cannot become something. Every effect has a cause. Space, matter, and time were all born into existence, meaning that this creator, the first cause, the author of the universe must be outside of those things. We see that the creator of the universe is timeless, transcendental, and non-spatial, which perfectly matches the traits to describe the Judeo-Christian God. I've spent a lot of time looking into the evidence that points to and away from the creator. I've spent a lot of time looking into the reliability of the Bible. I've spent a lot of time looking into who Jesus claimed to be. You're going to have to make a leap at some point because we do not know everything about the world. But I urge you, do not be so quick to rule out Christianity. I don't know your story. I don't know if you go to church, have never been to church, or briefly tried church for a bit, but I want you to know that there is another way. There is a better way. According to naturalism, we're here because things collided ever so perfectly. We're here not for any particular reason. We're just here. According to the biblical worldview, on the other hand, we're here and we have a purpose. You have value. You have a purpose. You have an identity. And it's all in Jesus. According to naturalism, things just happen and there's not really any certainty of what will come. But according to Christianity, on the other hand, we have hope. It's Jesus. We have certainty. It's in Jesus. He is the author of the universe. He knows us by name. He knows us fully and fully loves us. We're flawed. We're imperfect. We mess up. You have a super sketchy podcast host. But though we are sinners, Jesus died for us on the cross. He died for our sins and accomplished his own resurrection because he is Lord. It is your faith alone that saves you. That's it, man. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that he was raised from the dead, you're saved. One day this world will pass away, but for the Christ follower, the best is always yet to come, because no matter what happens during this time on earth, Jesus wins in the end. Our hope is in Jesus. For the Christ follower, the best is always yet to come, no matter what happens. Listen, I don't know how you feel about the Judeo-Christian God, but would you be willing to try out my worldview? What happened in the beginning? God created. Listen, there's another way to do life, and it's by following Jesus.